Hey guys, I'm Mike Narks. Welcome to Drag and Drive News, your source for news and entertainment from the Drag and Drive community. This week, we're talking about King of the Open Road and Southeast Street Meet. We're going to discuss Built for Drag and Drive with two racers on it that are both at King of the Open Road this weekend. This week's guest is Andy Starr, owner of Starr Performance and Consulting.
Talk about what I call the marathon of drag racing. Try cramming 100 gallons an hour through an eighth of an inch orifice. You're going to create.
He's giving us some great cooling and tuning tips for keeping our drag and drive cars alive. All right, let's kick this off with Built for Drag and Drive, brought to you by our friends at Sweet Patina. The Questionable Performance Solutions Rickety Nightmare and Trevor Brandon's Nissan GTR will be covered today. Make sure you tell your significant other that they get a discount on sweetpatina.com by using the code DND57. Car guys designing parts and apparel you'll love to wear and use, like the TKO hand cleaning wipes that I keep right out here in the shop. All right, guys, first up is Questionable Performance Solution, and Scotty gives us a walk around of the car while we were at Race Week. This car was built from extra parts in 6 weeks leading up to Race Week 2022. This weekend, they're going to be racing at King of the Open Road again in this car.
So, we've got my 93 Mustang, not my 89 coupe. We threw this thing together in 45 days just to come out here, Rocky Mountain Race Week 2.0. This thing's just got a stock style LS53 in it, small cam, turbo 400 converter, and that is it. Everything else on this car I had in the shop, and we threw it together really, really fast, and it runs low 13s right now. Hopefully it'll get faster though.
Literally built for drag and drive.
Yes, literally.
Built for a drag and drive event right now.
Yeah.
So we got about 10 seconds. How fast is the Rickety Rocket going to be when we see it next?
I'm hoping for some high eights.
Nice.
I want to see some high eights.
And Trevor Brandon is back from Canada. He brought down Rich Guido in the GTO because Trevor is here to pick up his Nissan GTR. Now, guys, this is the fastest Nissan in drag and drive history. His best average so far at a national event is 8.531 on Race Week 2022. Here he is telling us a little bit about it.
I'm Trevor Brandon from Canada. I've known Rich Guido, that's why I started this. This is my 5th event. Last year at this event I finished 2nd. I'm running one of the few imports in day 50 class. I've done it 4 times. I finished 4th 3 times and 2nd once.
Nice.
I'm currently sitting in 2nd. Just a fast GTR, I guess.
Yeah.
An import.
Yeah.
So far it's been durable for 4 events so far. This is my 5th.
Wow.
I've come all the way. I'm 7 hours north of actually Richard, my house, and I worked in camp. Like I'm in 8 and 6, like in camp for a couple weeks, and then I come home. So this is actually my days off. So I drove from work on Tuesday last week, drove to the house, which is a 4-hour drive, about 350 miles. Dropped my diesel off, grabbed my wife's C8 Corvette, drove all the way down here, got to Dallas, Texas, to the Jotech shop where my car was at, and in Thursday at 6 o'clock.
How many miles is that?
3,600 miles.
3,600
Just a
miles.
smidge over 36. But
How many miles did you drive the first day, you said?
I drove 2,000 miles the first day, and 1,600 the second day. I got a hotel for 4 hours.
You're an animal, dude. So in 3,600 miles, you slept 4 hours?
Yeah.
Well, probably 3 by the time you.
No, I was at the hotel for 5, so I got 4 hours sleep.
Gosh, you're an animal. Where can people follow your stuff?
I got an Instagram is Gojira1. It's the same as my license plate. I have a YouTube channel the same name.
Okay.
It's not very big. It's just some runs from here and stuff, just random stuff. It's not anything big. It's just keepsakes and stuff. So.
Yeah, that's awesome, dude. Well, thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
No problem.
All right, guys, in event news for this week, which we're looking for a sponsor for that segment, I'm headed over to King of the Open Road in Oklahoma City on Sunday morning to talk to the racers and the promotional team to see what is in store for everyone for 2023. I'm having Thunder Valley team print out the ETs from Saturday night and Sunday, and we'll use the 2 fastest passes to determine racer averages from the King of the Open Road event. Street Neat will have me their data on Monday, so we should have all of the stats from 2022 season gathered up by next weekend's episode, so we can finalize the regional list, the 8th mile list, and everything is set in stone for 2022, and we'll know who the fastest people are and who the slowest people are. And while not necessarily drag and drive, it does help the drag and drive addiction page. I'm headed to Los Angeles, California for the final stop of the eBay Motors Parts of America tour. If you haven't seen the coverage, hop onto the playlist on our YouTube channel. We've got a full list of videos there. They're auctioning for the cars that are at the link below. Cars like the Lee C parts, 1,500 horsepower Audi R8 cart. The link is down in the description to do that. While I'm out there, I'm going to hit the Peterson Automotive Museum and hopefully catch a cruise night or two. So be looking for some posts. If you live in the LA area, I hope to meet up while I'm out there. And guys, if you haven't done it yet, you can see I am wearing my Drag and Drive Addiction hoodie. These things are going to be godsends as we go into the winter months, as we get cooler in the shops and garages, and some of you guys working stuff in your driveway. If you're going to do that and build your drag and drive cart, you've got to have something that keeps you warm. If you jump on draganddrive.com/shop and find something that you like, we are offering free shipping until the end of the year. So, you can share that link with folks, maybe your significant other, to figure out what you want for Christmas. This is just a sample of the interview. The full interview will drop next week.
Marathon of drag racing. Try cramming 100 gallons an hour through an eighth of an inch orifice. You're going to create heat. And most people don't monitor oil temperatures. First year drag week, I'm doing 265, 280 degrees of oil temperature.
Your level of knowledge, I think we could talk for 2 hours. Here's what. All right, guys, I'm super excited. We have Mr. Andy Starr in today. Starr Performance. I mean, listen, this is going to be a fun one. Kind of catapulting on the last guest we had talking about some cooling fan technology and things like that. We're going to go into some cooling tips for fuel and how to keep your engine happy and things like that with tuning and all that kind of stuff. I'm excited for what you guys are going to learn today. So let's jump into it. Andy, tell these folks who you are, the company, and then obviously where they can find you.
Sure, you got it. Hey, Mike, thanks so much for having me on. This is great stuff. The drag and drive stuff is right up our alley. Everybody loves doing this stuff, and there's a bunch of things going on. So I'm Andy Starr. I own Starr Performance and Consulting. I'm a relatively newcomer, but I've been tuning EFI for many years. Started out with Fast, worked for Holly as an EFI motorsports manager, working with high-end engine shops and tuners, diagnosing issues and looking at solutions for tuning situations. So obviously I'm a big fan of drag and drive. I guess what I also wanted to say is that you can find me on Facebook, Starr Performance and Consulting. Also, starperformancetuning.com. That's my contact information if anybody has any questions, for sure.
Awesome. So let's talk about your time at Holly and how, if you're helping tuners in the world get their stuff right. I mean, I can't imagine the amount of knowledge you have to keep in your brain of tunability.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. Tuning also breaks into other dynamics, electrical wiring, all kinds of sensor inputs. Certainly, every EFI installation is custom. Not a single one is out of the box. So there's always situations where you're going to have problems with possibly harnessing, basic calibration issue, or maybe you were looking to do something really unique, use the ECU to perform a function that requires some out of the box thinking. And so these were things that we were able to bounce off of the customers and go ahead and introduce into the tuning profile of the ECU.
That's exciting. Well,
Yeah.
Dragon Drive is what we do. We love the community. We love the racers. We love just the mental capacity it takes to compete in these events, because a lot of folks have race cars and they take them to the track every weekend, but they don't drive them 800 miles after that. So let's talk about how to keep those cars alive, one,
right,
and then maybe some tips that you can give the racers that would help with that.
Sure. Let's talk about what I call the marathon of drag racing. It's a whole nother world when we start taking these basically race bred parts and we put them on the street, and we expect to go ahead and have these perform to a level of being able to drive them basically 8-10 hours a day. And of course, eliminating any type of failures. And a lot of these components really aren't designed for that. So we have to build in safeties or make the product even take it to the next level and make it stronger so that way it'll survive. And, I come from the naturally aspirated world, where we're always trying to increase the volumetric efficiency of the engine. And that typically requires more camshaft, more lift, more speed, more compression, so we have a harder job when it comes to doing that and surviving compared to, a boosted class in some way, shape, or form. So, a lot of these tricks we've learned by failing. And, of course, I'm learning from other competitors that have succeeded. And so
you NA guys are nuts, man. It's a whole nother level of stuff.
It really is. Cubic inches wins, but that's cost prohibitive for a lot of guys. So we have to make power the old-fashioned way. We have to find it by working and researching and doing what we need to do. But one of the things I think you touched on right away was fueling. We'll go down the EFI path for sure, talking about fueling and efficiencies, which really makes what we're doing much easier. In previous conversations, like with Hyde, for example, we were talking about how to keep fuel cool. One of the things that we don't realize is that when we have a factory gas tank location and we're driving down the road, we actually, especially on McAdam, we have a lot of latent heat that's coming off of the road, and it picks up in that gas tank, and the gas tank becomes a great big heat sink. It overheats the fuel. So anything we can do to go ahead and provide some sort of buffer between the road and the fuel tank is going to reduce our temperature for the fuel. Even though we're running at high pressures, we can still start igniting the fuel in the tank, which creates a vapor lock situation. Keeping that in mind. But here's I think something most people don't know, and that is regulator orifice size. So we're going to take a fuel pump that's moving 100 gallons an hour, and of course at part throttle, most of that tank most of that fuel is being returned. We're not using it. Racing down the race, we're using a lot of that fuel, but that pump is pumping that gallons per hour, regardless if we use it or not. And so anytime we try and squeeze a fluid through an orifice, depending on the size of the orifice, we're going to start to heat the fuel up. Looking at the size of the orifice on your regulator is pretty important. There's products out there that have larger orifices. Most orifices and most regulators are only about 1/8 of an inch. Try cramming 100 gallons an hour through 1/8 of an inch orifice, you're going to create heat the old-fashioned way. So there's companies out there that offer orifices in the 230, 240 thousandths range that allow us to really keep the fuel cooler as we're driving down the road, because of not trying to squeeze it as hard through a smaller orifice.
That's an interesting thought. A lot of folks think of cooling the fuel on the way to the engine, but really I would, at that point, cooling the fuel back to the tank. If you can start cooler, you'll end up cooler.
Well, there's no doubt. And obviously you're going to pick up latent heat at the engine. I mean, that's a gimme, because the fuel rails are going to soak up latent heat. They're going to be hot already. They're going to start starting to heat up the fuel, and now we're going to cram it through an orifice. So it just cascades on top of itself and creates an overheating concern. So isolating the fuel, having a good orifice size on your regulator, those two things are immediately going to help out in a long distance event.
Yeah, certainly. You had mentioned Todd earlier. He runs Midwest Drags, and they've moved to July in Virginia, which I think
Oh, yeah,
we're gonna see some heat. So
yeah.
this is a great tip for that. And of course, all of our Rocky Mountain Race Week family in June, they're cruising across Nebraska and Kansas and Oklahoma and Colorado and all that stuff out that way. So those guys have insane heat as well. I think they saw 106 or 107 this year.
Wow. Yeah, no
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah. It's pretty brutal out there from what I've said or what I've heard. So Eric Engler, he had fuel issues a couple of years ago, and I think worked through a lot of that stuff with some of the things you're talking about. Protecting the, maybe maybe a layer of like almost like a heat shield. Is that what you're saying? Under the fuel tank somehow?
Yeah, sure. Either a heat shield, spraying undercoating on the tank to try and repel some of the heat, moving the tank into the trunk, putting a cell in it. Oh, and another option too, of course, is to put a controller on the pump. If your pump can be, PWN, you can slow the pump down, which of course will reduce the amount of fuel passing through the regulator. But yeah, anything you can do to build. I mean, you and I've seen it. We've driven down the road. We've seen the heat coming off, like in the movies, coming off the road at times. Well, that heat, of course, is bombarding the gas tank all the time. I think this is a good time to segue into the dynamic relationship between coolant system, oil temperature, and trans temperature. All three of these factors have a work together. So if you have, and of course, this could also affect fueling, but when we're talking about temperatures, if your oil temperatures are high, it's going to affect coolant temperatures, which are going to affect, everything, of course, and then, of course, transmission temperature. So if you're running an automatic, having a trans-cooler on it, we already do that. But, putting a cooler on the engine oil itself is a big to do. We can reduce those. And most people don't monitor oil temperatures. I do. My first year at Drag Week, I'm doing 265, 280 degrees of oil temperature. And it was crazy. Those are numbers that are not sustainable. And they'll hurt pieces. And of course, they'll artificially raise the coolant temperature too. So you're fighting a double-edged sword. Taking a look at oil temperatures is a really important aspect of longevity, especially us NA guys where we've got a lot of spring pressure. We're wearing the rockers out, we're wearing the lifters out. We need that oil at a consistent temperature to protect those components because that temperature kills the lubricity of the oil eventually to the point where we'll have component failure.
I love it when you engineers get involved in this car stuff, man.
Well, I wish I were an engineer. Let's just have, I've fallen more times than I care to talk about. But what it does is it gives us practical experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it comes down to. How are we going to survive this event, with all of the pressures that we're seeing, and of course not having lubricity to take care of it. So that is a key point. So keeping in mind, you'd be surprised. You just temp on that oil pan after about 4 hours on the road and all that latent heat coming off the macadam, and you'd be surprised at some of the temperatures you'll see. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it would be interesting if some folks are watching this to kind of let us know, the people that track their oil temperature, what you see after a long drive, in the summertime on the drag and drive event.
Yeah, you bet you'd be surprised. So, I run an oil cooler now and I monitor oil temperature, and on the hottest days, I'm at 220 degrees,
Nice.
205, 240 really is kind of a maximum number. Even if we get into some of that synthetic stuff, which is probably good around 260 degrees, is it really worth the chance? How do you really know, where the breaking point becomes? So you stay out of that danger zone, everything is happier.
The tuning side of stuff, what do you do for the drive? How do you keep your engine cooler along the drives and things like that?
That's a great question. So, there's a relationship between static and dynamic compression ratio in the fuel that you're running, and of course the load on the motor. And so if we take a look at the whole idea is to, take that fuel charge, burn that fuel charge in a certain distance of crankshaft travel. I think the standard is 20 degrees after top dead center. So, of course, in order to burn that, we need to have compression. We need to have the correct amount of fuel for the air that's in the cylinder. And of course, the timing event all comes into play. If any of those are off to the point where we start losing the efficiency of burning the fuel, and this is a perfect example. Let's take an 8-to-1 supercharged motor, which some guys still run today. If you took that same analogy, an 8-to-1 motor in your Toyota, what fuel would you run in it? Well, it would be 87 octane because it can't stand 93 octane. There's not enough compression for it to burn it in a complete fashion. So we take some of these lower compression motors, we run all this octane fuel in it, and as we start burning the fuel past that real sweet spot of about 20 degrees after top dead center, that fuel continues to burn, and what it does is uses the cylinder wall as a heat sink. It now overheats the cylinder wall.
Mm.
Now, the cooling systems typically are not designed to use the, the cooler or that whole entire block as a heat sink and try to cool that. It will overpower the cooling system in short order. So keeping that cylinder happy with the correct amount of fuel and timing for the load is going to be important. And what makes EFI so nice is that we can target a leaner mixture, higher timing, and a light load or no load situation to help keep the cylinder cool, which is much harder to do with a carburetor. So the efficiency of the motor goes up. The cooling aspect of it is much easier to take care of. And of course, we just have a better drive all in all. So those are some of the advantages of EFI and using that thought process. And if the fuel burns slower than what the dynamic compression can actually use it in that timing event, well, you've just really have wasted all that combustion pressure, and instead of created heat, unneeded heat, and you've overtaxed the cooling system. I ran into a trick a little bit ago. It's almost 20 years ago now. So we talk about cooling systems. We talk about some of the things guys do. In my opinion, the enemy in the cooling system, believe it or not, is water itself. And of course, we use water exclusively. So we have products out there such as Water Wetter. And one of its things that it does is reduces the surface tension of water. Everybody's familiar with surface tension, but if you take a glass of water and you turn it upside down and you wait a second or two after you flip it back side up, it's going to fill the bottom up some. The water just doesn't move off the surface is really, really nice. And so therefore it picks up a lot of temperature, but doesn't go anywhere. And of course, in order to try and circumvent that, we run a bunch of pressure on the cap. We get these fast moving cooling fans or water pumps. And of course, we do everything we can. But ultimately, no matter what you do and the pressure that you have, water, ethylene glycol based, is going to boil somewhere at around 220 to 240 degrees. There's no way around that. In aluminum head, we can have hot spots that reach 500 degrees. And so now we're just literally boiling water off the cylinder head. And of course, when we start to boil water, it's going to turn into a great big bubble. It's going to stop the cooling process in that particular area. It's going to hang tight, not move. And of course, it's going to create even a hotter spot. So a bunch of years ago, I moved into a propylene glycol. We know it as Evans, which is probably the most popular stuff out there. And what I have found is that, this stuff boils at 376 degrees at 0 PSI. And so we're able to keep temperatures much more consistent in the engine. We may actually see a 5-degree engine temperature as far as cooling is concerned. You might see 5 degrees of extra temperature, but because it's pulling so much more temperature out of the motor, you're going to see that in the gauge. But the engine's going to be happier and healthier because we're not going to have localized hot spots. We're not going to have boiling that turns into a great big bubble and stops the whole process. We're not going to have high surface tension. We're able to put coolant right back on that spot to keep it in check. So, investigating Evans, for those of us, once again, naturally aspirated, lots of compression. We run these things, on pump gas. We're always fighting, the specter of detonation and too much timing. But we can mitigate the potential of that happening by keeping the combustion chamber in check, which allows us to optimize tune-up, keep the efficiency of the motor up, and allow us to keep everything happy. And that's really the goal.
Well, let's talk about what you have planned for 2023. Are you attending some events? What do you got coming?
I'm looking forward to doing the Midwest drags. I'm still kind of deciding what events I need to do. Being a new businessman, I'm trying to keep my expenses in check while at the same time, get my name out there and continue to learn and grow. So right now I'm going to stick with the Midwest drags. I'm going to hit some other local drag races, but yeah, we'll see what happens. It's a little early to tell just yet.
That's fun. So are you going to bring anything cool for Midwest drag?
I've got a Pro Street 56 Chevy, which I'm going to be bringing.
Nice.
It's a stick shift car. It's a 13-to-1 motor. Yeah, sure. So I'm a big Hilborn guy. I cut my teeth in Hilborn fuel injection way back in the early 2000s. That's really I got my start in EFI. So yeah, this is a Hilborn injected 582. I'm a stick shift guy, a GF5R G-Force. That is a fantastic transmission. You know what it does? It makes guys like me that can't drive look like pros. And so I give the credit to the transmission, I really do. But there's nothing like throwing a stick shift down a racetrack. It's extremely exhilarating. These cars are built to drive. Some of them are really on the edge, on the cutting edge. And the power that the guys are making today and all these things, so they really are on the cutting edge. But ultimately they have to drive. And if they don't drive, they're not worth a nickel.
That's exactly right. Well, thank you so much for hanging out today. I really appreciate it. I hope you learned something today.
I really appreciate the opportunity, Mike. Look forward to seeing you at the races.
All right, guys, thanks for watching. I will see you in the morning from the road on my way to King of the Open Road for your daily dose of drag and drive number 80. I can't believe it.